On the morning of December 2nd, 1991, the attention of a mariachi returning home after working all Saturday morning was diverted to the presence of a small child wandering the street. As soon as he came out of his astonishment, he realized that the child was Alejandro, the youngest son of the neighboring Chavez Lopez family. From a distance, he could see that the boy's clothes were dirty. It even seemed to be covered with mud, but as soon as he had it in front of him, he saw that it was blood. The situation became increasingly confusing, and not knowing how to act, he sought out his wife for help. The silence of the Chavez Lopez family house and the open doors aroused suspicions that something terrible had happened. They notified neighborhood security when they arrived at the home. They understood that what had happened in there was beyond their capabilities. A case for the police. When the agents were present at the elegant two-story house on Volcan Street in the Jardines de Morelos neighborhood, located in the neighborhood of Ecatepec, state of Mexico, they found a scene that they could never erase from their memory. A terrible massacre. Doors inside had happened, with strong signs of violence in sight. The bodies of a couple and 3 girls lay on the upper floor. The only survivor was the youngest son, Alexander. Although he was not aware of what had happened, the child was the key in starting one of the most difficult investigations that the judicial police of the Mexican nation had to face at the place of investigation. There were few clues to guide investigators on the path to take, but still no one could understand the killer's essay on the family that might have motivated someone to commit such a crime. Why kill all the members? There wasn't a clue. However, during the 3 months that the investigation lasted, a lot of surprises and unexpected twists kept the police authorities on alert. The slightest detail was relevant to the purpose of bringing to light the truth of what happened in what was the first multiple homicide in the history of Mexico. The nocturnal criminalist, the Chavez Lopez family, was composed of 6 members. Fiv Lopez had a daughter from a previous marriage named Lorena. When the couple got together, Alejandro decided to adopt her as his own. Then they had 2 more girls, Yasmin and Erica, until 5 years later little Alejandro arrived. Although the neighborhood they had chosen to live in had a bad reputation, the family ignored it and decided to settle there anyway. Betting that one day it would become a pleasant place for everyone, they built a gorgeous 2-story house with a gabled roof. This immediately caught the attention of the neighbors, since the residences in that area were more humble. Without a doubt, the family had a status that they did not share with the other locals, and they had no intention of doing so to Alexander. The father of the family owned 2 schools that his wife Fiv helped manage. Although both had teachers' degrees, they did not practice the profession. The man was also a fan of old American cars. He bought them, restored them, and permanently resold them. He was a man with ease for business, and it was noticeable in every venture he carried out, which made him a successful subject and placed the family in a comfortable position. He was also a protective man of his wife and children. Girls were forbidden to interact with boys in the area so that people would not think they belonged to the same social level. Although they lived there, their activities were outside Jardín de Morelos. Lorena, the oldest girl, 13 years old, was the most watched by her parents, since she was entering the age at which suitors begin to arrive. The girl felt suffocated, but there wasn't much to be done. His parents had made the house rules clear to him. The neighbors perceived the distance that the Chavez Lopez family preferred to maintain, but From outside, they noticed that the family was very united and hard-working. They woke up very early. They prepared their children for school and spent their days working. They had a high reputation and a prestigious image in front of the eyes of others. For that reason, no one understood why anyone would want to kill them the way they did. There was only one piece of information that night. The night of the tragedy, they had been at a party on December 1st. Of 1991, the 6 members of the family dressed elegantly after being invited to celebrate the 15th birthday of the daughter of a teacher who worked at the Rochhouse School, one of the schools that the couple directed. Also at the celebration was Alejandro's great friend Salvador Galarza, with whom he used to share nights out to bars. The family enjoyed the party until 10 p.m. at night. When they decided to return to Casa Salvador, Galarza offered to take them in his vehicle. When they arrived at the door of the family residence, only Fiv got off, and the children Alejandro and Salvador continued with the festive spirit and went to a bar they used to frequent. Alexander had a reputation for always flirting with women. He fell in love with a dancer who was present at the place. He proposed to continue the party somewhere else, but the woman had intentions with her friend Salvador. The 3 got into the car drunk and headed to Alejandro's house. The family man got out, and when he reached the door, he realized that he had no keys with him. So, instead of banging on the door for someone to open it, he decided to climb up the balcony that led to the rooms. Upstairs, he entered through one of the windows. Walking to the main room where Fiv and little Alexander slept, he tore off his shirt and threw himself upside down on the bed next to his wife. After a while, he woke up, alarmed by his attacker's attack. Fiv had been gagged, so her cries were in vain. Nobody heard anything. The couple tried to defend themselves, but the stab wounds they received left them in agony. The girls were the next victims. Lorena, the oldest, was abused and then murdered. The youngest, Yasmin and Erica, aged 10 and 8, were gagged with the laces of a slipper and the cord of a lamp. Only little Alejandro was saved, who during his parents' struggle against the attacker received a cut in the armpit and a blow to the head that left him unconscious for a while. When he woke up in the morning, he went to his parents, tried to wake them up, but he had no response. He went to find his sisters, but none of them woke up in shock. Little Alejandro, 3 years old, went down the stairs and out into the street through the main door. At around 8 a.m., the mariachi who lived next to the Chavez Lopez house saw the dirty boy and, alone on the street, tried to obtain some information. But the boy barely stammered a few words. He said that a doctor had operated on his mother, but she did not wake up. The mariachi and his wife alerted that something strange had happened in the house and called the police authorities. The police were present at the scene, and from then on, everything that continued became too confusing. Once inside the 2-story house, the police toured the ground floor. He perceived that everything was in place. The objects were in order, and there were no signs of theft. Then they found the staircase that led upstairs 1 to 1. They went up the stairs slowly. Voices could be heard. They followed her stealthily until they reached the door of the room from which they came. They pushed to get in, but something stopped them. They used a little more force and made it inside. Slumped to the ground and entwined by their legs were the half-naked bodies of Alexander and Fiv, surrounded by their own blood. The walls were proof of the ferocity with which this heinous crime had been committed. Just a few hours before, a small television still on was the only sound that could be heard in the oppressive silence that filled the house. The officers continued to search the rooms until they found the girls in one of them. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Without a doubt, it was a massacre like no other. All showed signs of torture, and all had their throats slit. The questions soon appeared. However, evidence was scarce, and confusion reigned throughout the investigation process. When the time came to begin the search that would lead to the author of the terrible crime, the investigators only had few clues that they had managed to collect from the expertise carried out at the house. The print of a bloody shoe was stamped on the sheets of the double bed. The knot with which they had gagged the little girls was also striking, since it was not just any knot, it was very specific and required some skill. On the other hand, the doors and windows had not been forced upon entry. Therefore, one of their first conclusions was that the family knew the aggressor. With this only data, the authorities began the search, but they were completely disoriented. They questioned hundreds of people who lived in Jardín de Morelos, but no one knew anything. No one had heard any strange noises. They just hadn't seen anything. Time was running out, and the criminal was still at large. The situation worsened even more when investigators learned that Fepe's sister was married to the governor's son. This resulted in enormous pressure being placed on the shoulders of the police and the judiciary by the political system. There were many questions, but no answers, until they finally pulled out the last one. As they had up their sleeve, they summoned La Gente Camarena, an expert in criminalistics of the Mexican nation, to collaborate with the cause. When he was present in Jardín de Morelos, all responsibilities fell on his back for the fate of the victims. The agent was determined to solve the crime, and would do so regardless of the cost, making a clean slate. Camarena questioned the population again, including the girls' teachers and classmates. They all told their truth. The teachers reported that the girls, despite belonging to a family with a good economic status, did not attend school presentably. According to them, their clothing did not match the status they wished to have. Problems with teachers also came to light. Well, it was said that after an argument with the union, Alexander had kicked some teachers out of the school he ran. On the other hand, the neighbors little by little told their truth. Thus, it was discovered that Alexander had some outstanding bills to pay. Some time ago, he had hired personnel to carry out construction work, both at the school and in the house. But when it came time to pay off debts, there was always a problem. A dispute would take place, and employees would be fired without paying them for the work done. Without a doubt, these testimonies gave direction to the investigation. Alexander had made several enemies along the way, however. They couldn't help but wonder why they would murder the entire family. Furthermore, it could never be verified that the people involved in lawsuits with him were perpetrators of the crime. Therefore, the advances dissipated. Camarena was not willing to give up, but he had to find a way forward. All possible variants had to be thought of. Camarena watched the families of the two adult victims. Alexander's family didn't seem too interested in knowing the truth about what happened. One of his brothers went on to manage the schools that the marriage had left elsewhere. Febb's family was completely committed to solving the case. The sister provided all the information she could in order to find the criminal. He noticed that some time ago he had given a heart-shaped charm to his eldest niece, Lorena, and it was missing. This was no minor fact. The perp might have stolen some belongings, but when he went back to his notes, nothing led him to the truth. Everyone was a suspect. Absolutely everyone was in the crosshairs, even family members. Particularly, The investigators' gaze fell on Phoebe's brother when they remembered that little Alejandro repeated over and over that his mother was operated on by a doctor and she no longer woke up. They suspected that his own brother, who was a doctor, might be the perpetrator. But once again, that theory fell apart for lack of evidence. Suddenly, as if falling from the sky, the phone rang. Camarena raised the tube, and on the other side, the voice of a lady who did not want to give her name assured that she knew who the murderer of the Chavez Lopez family was. Agent Camarena asked a few questions, jotted down an address in his notebook, and summoned 2 of his fellow investigators. There was nothing to lose. If the information was true, they would be on the verge of catching the killer. If it was false, they returned to the same place they were in, did not hesitate, and went after him. The data provided by the so-called anonymous person added to the list of suspects a name and surname that had not until now been considered. It was Jose Julio Cipriano Luna. Cipriano was a tinsmith who lived in Ecatepec, but recently he had moved to another state. But that had to do with the Chavez Lopez case. That was a question for the Camarena people to investigate. But there was one detail they couldn't miss. Going after Cipriano meant crossing the boundaries of jurisdiction. Camarena was in a dilemma. To give up the possible resolution of the case or compromise your professional career. However, throwing everything overboard was not an option for him. He went with his team to the place indicated by the lady on the phone, asked about the tinsmith's workshop, and they sent him to his whereabouts. When she found him, she posed as a civilian and convinced him that she needed her services. However, when he was able to adapt the situation, so that the suspect had no escape, he cornered him and revealed the real reason why he was looking for him. He took out the photo of the Chavez Lopez couple, which he obtained during the investigation, and asked him if he knew them. The reaction that Cipriano's eyes conveyed incriminated him. He tried to bribe Camarena with $10,000 to get out of the situation, but upon understanding that it was in vain, he finally confessed the whole truth. Jose Julio Cipriano Luna, 28, declared that 2 other accomplices participated along with him, Adan Robledo, 20, and Alejandro Cruz Ramirez, 18. They finally had the names of those responsible for the most atrocious multiple homicide to date when they managed to find the 3 murderers. The detainees gave statements for 6 hours and the truth came out. There they confessed that on the night of December 1st, 1991, they had attended the same party as the Chavez family. Lopez Cipriano said that he had known Alejandro Chavez since before because he had carried out work on one of the cars he restored. He added that they had had a dispute because he had not been able to meet the agreed deadline. He just needed to polish it, but then angry. Alejandro took the car and was left owing $600,000 MXN. When they met at the party, Ciprian approached to remind them of his debt, and Alexander replied that he would never pay it. For his part, Adam had been eyeing the couple's eldest daughter at the party for some time. He saw the opportunity to approach her and talk to her. But when Alexander saw them, he interrupted them in a bad way and forbade Lorena to talk to him. And with any of their kind, resentment took hold of Cipriano and Robledo, and added to the amount of alcohol they had been drinking all night. Common sense lost the battle. The family left the party at 10:02 p.m. The drunken youths enjoyed the drink and the music for a while longer. Later, when they left the place stumbling in clumsy steps, they walked through the streets of Jardín de Morelos. They passed the handsome house on Volcano Street, which stood out among the humble houses around it, and the worst idea they could have. He crossed over their heads. They infiltrated the house, crept up the stairs and followed the sound of a television. They entered the main room where they slept. Phoebe and Alexander, who was still half drunk, they jumped on top of them. And without saying a word, they attacked them while Cipriano stabbed Alexander again and again. Adam Amor gave his to Phoebe to prevent her from screaming for help next to the bed where the fierce massacre was taking place. He slept in his crib. Little Alejandro tried to defend themselves, and after the intense struggle, Alejandro Cruz Martinez also attacked her, who also accompanied them in their thirst for revenge. He went to Lorina's room, tied her up with the laces of a slipper, and abused her. Then he went into the room where the younger girls slept. He also gagged and attacked them when they had done their job and were about to leave the house. They heard Alexander sobbing so much that he had experienced meat coats and retraced his steps. And with the knife he made a cut on the neck of each of the members of the Chavez Lopez family, the two except little Alejandro. None of them had noticed his presence. The child would thus become the sole survivor of the bloody crime. After the statement during the raid of the detainees' homes, he found himself in Cipriano's house, the heart-shaped gold charm that Phoebe's sister had. He had also given his niece Lorena a video cassette player that belonged to the family and that the criminals had taken over that night, in which they ended the lives of 5 of its members. Furthermore, it was verified that the footprint found on the sheets where the couple had been murdered matched a shoe from Lo Jalatero, so on March 21st, 1992. Finally, they were sentenced to 40 years in prison for every one of the murders in total, counting all the crimes for which they were accused. The 3 murderers were sentenced to 250 years in prison for criminal association, carrying a prohibited weapon, abuse, homicide, and theft. Today, they are serving their sentences in a maximum security prison. The terrible case that took place in Ecatepec unfortunately became a precedent for what it would be like to live there for the inhabitants of the place. Criminal acts are the order of the day. The constant requests for help and security claims do not seem to matter to the local authorities, just as almost an entire family was lost more than 30 years ago at the hands of the Ecatepec Jackals. The tragedy continues in the area, claiming new lives every day.